which is good.
Yeah.
And I think we've looked at a few other ordinances. Try to get a flavor of what other towns are doing. So I know, Andy, you made some suggestions
Yep.
how we proceed.
Well, just in that, I'm pulling, of all the things, I didn't print out my own thing here, but you attached it, so I'm just gonna pull it up on my phone. I mean, I just made an outline for this meeting based off of what I thought, starting with things I thought would be the easiest additions for us to make, just because it seems like there's definitely a consensus around them, and they're not very complicated. And then, running down to the things that are maybe more complicated. So
Do you think maybe the first thing would be setbacks?
I think the very first thing I have is recreational use, and that I thought we all kind of agreed that we should include a provision encouraging the accommodation of existing recreational uses on a site. But, obviously we can't require that, but it
Right.
just isn't in the existing ordinance. And I know
Yeah.
that that's something that you guys look at, and it just helps to have it in writing. So that seemed like something to be there.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be voluntary on their part, but it certainly puts it front and center. We recommend, so it's like, it sounds like up on the ridge, they'd still allow hunting.
Yep.
On this newest project, they're allowing snowmobile trail, that they're gonna relocate it. So I think a recommendation certainly isn't gonna pose any undue restriction on an applicant, I don't think. So retain existing. Yeah,
Okay, one of the things that I noticed is that Reedfield has a purpose statement. And this is in the Farmland Trust booklet. And it seems like that would be something, purpose statement, what I underlined is support the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, including orderly development, efficient use of infrastructure, and protection of natural, scenic, and agricultural resources. Would that be the place to put in, to add it to that?
well, what's different with our ordinance is we have this comprehensive ordinance and the solar is just one section. So I don't
Okay.
know that we sort of have the same type of setup.
Okay.
That's gonna sort of work in the same way. But, I mean, we'd almost have to go back to what the existing ordinance has. If there is a purpose clause, and I can't remember if there is or there isn't.
Okay.
Getting back to the recreational line, Ray, you seemed to be squinting when I said that. Did you have some other thoughts about the recreational? Seemed like you had something to say, maybe.
Should be worth 2 points to the applicant.
2 points? Is there actually a point system? I'm not on the planning board, so I don't, okay.
Yeah. You can encourage it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it's laying out like what is important to people in Monmouth, I guess, or to the planning board or to this group or select board or.
Well, I mean, would we join it with not just recreational, but existing agricultural uses as well? Recommend continuation of. Or do we keep these separate bullet points? Maybe it makes sense to make it separate.
I feel like it makes sense to keep it separate. Just you know, but I guess we'll get down to what we had discussed, you know, the either or sort of thing with mitigation fee possibility, or, you know, I feel like the recreational use is just that is inherently voluntary.
Yeah.
Public access on private property, so.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like anyone has any significant objection to that.
No, but I agree that it should be included.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll include that.
Yeah. If you do recreational around that site, what about motorized recreational? Probably wouldn't want it on that site.
I mean,
Youngsters with 4x4s having fun on the perimeter or whatever.
well, I mean, currently in Monmouth, there isn't really existing recreational use. I mean, there's no ATV trail. It would be, I mean, snowmobile trails would be a good example of, I think, an
On
example
this site.
to highlight, but just generally in town. I mean, we have 40 miles of snowmobile trails, but as far as I know, there are no public ATV trails in the town of Monmouth.
And the snowmobile trails are being utilized, sections of them. you
Nope.
know what?
Not that they're not supposed to be utilized for that, you know. But we just talked about trails yesterday at the Conservation Commission meeting. So yes, I do not believe that there are any four-wheeler trails in Monmouth. Trails are very exclusively snowmobile trails. In fact, trailblazers feel very strongly about that and are very protective of their trails in terms
They
of.
don't want to.
Well, they don't want anybody else doing anything on them, because also their permission from landowners is exclusively for snowmobile riding during the winter. And that is, you know, initially that.
That's what my concern was. Like what took place down at the ball fields.
Right, but I mean, that's not what we're talking about in terms of, you know, existing recreational uses that are allowed.
Did some damage.
Yeah, some young kids had themselves a night down there.
They're gonna go have fun on the site no matter what, so it doesn't.
Boys will be boys, or girls will be girls.
Yeah,
Would other kinds like ATV, that come, or would that come in front of the conservation committee?
what do you mean? You mean permitting use of the snowmobile trails? No, the Conservation Commission has absolutely nothing to do with the trailblazers are the only people in town who have any say over what happens with the snowmobile trails in town. The agreements are strictly between the trailblazers and landowners. We actually, at the Conservation Commission meeting yesterday, there were two horseback riding enthusiasts who came to our meeting and want to talk about trails. And, you know, there is, I think, a lot of interest around creating multi-use trails and possibly starting with sections of the snowmobile trail. But at the end of the day, you know, the trailblazers are the only ones who they would have to, you know, give their blessing to any other use of those. So, but I would, I mean, in my opinion, I would just leave the recreational statement kind of vague, like I wrote in the outline anyway.
Okay.
Because yes, I mean, hunting where possible, or, you know, I mean, it just, you know, that ultimately is the landowner's discretion. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it looks like the next thing you talked about was the inverters. I was just trying to find the present noise standards in the ordinance. We should have gone to the index, but instead I'm rolling through it. It'll come up soon.
65-45.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
I have 60 and 45, but that was based off of, I think, what you said at the previous meeting. So.
Coming here. Here we go. All right. So from you know, if you're near at 60 and 45 is 60 during the day. if you abut a residential and 45 at night. Is that what you had on yours, Andy? Because I switched.
Yes, that, yep.
So typically what happens is the applicant comes in and says, we'll meet that standard. And until it's built in an operation, you don't know, really. But so it has to meet these requirements, whether we add a requirement that once it's built, they have to provide, once the inverters are installed and operational, do we require them to submit a study results? And if they exceed the limit, they have to do some type of additional screening. Or they may have to relocate the inverter, or I don't know. I mean, this. Anyway.
The 60 during the day is not a big deal. Nighttime noise, it butters.
Yeah,
Problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, noise is so much more noticeable when it's calm at night, and that's when I hear it on the farm. I think they're Route 126 from our back pastures, and it's everywhere.
But,
Yeah,
it's not a major problem for the CEO. Once it's up and running,
to test it,
you have to go out and take.
if we have the equipment.
Supposedly we get the equipment. Something happened to it, then we'll.
Yeah,
I can.
but we may have to build in that once built, there needs to be a inspection and determination that the noise guidelines are met with the inverters.
I mean, it would seem that if the code enforcement officer is already tending to be stretched thin, putting the burden of proof on the developer that they are in compliance with the ordinance, just getting a third party.
You have to have a third party inspection.
I mean, I guess for these companies with all sorts of money, I don't see that being too burdensome.
yeah.
But is that bizarre compared to other ordinances on the books to have something like that after?
I haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
But
In reading the other ordinances, for example, the visual impact from Bodenham and others, they're very specific. So I don't see any problem, and certainly the mitigation fees, and other things. I don't see any reason why we can't be just as specific about that as other things. If they're going to do this, then these are the standards that they have to meet. So I say put it in. They're big companies; they can take it.
well, it shouldn't be that big an item, but yeah, they just have to do a test, a daytime and a nighttime test and submit the results.
I presume there are companies that do that. Some of them will do that, third parties. And, yeah.
Yep.
You get numerous. Typical engineers in the state of Maine that'll do it.
Okay, so is that the plan then? We're gonna,
Yeah,
we think the 60 and 45 is sufficient and but the developer has to hire a third party after construction to confirm that they're in compliance.
yeah.
Somebody's got to get it
Yeah.
to us in black and white. Whether it's a third party or CEO, whatever.
Well,
Does it need to be done only once?
yeah, I mean,
Until you get a complaint from one of the abutters.
yeah. I suppose you can say unless the inverters are enclosed, they have to do this. I don't know whether I think what they told us up on the ridge is they could put screening around, some kind of like concrete.
Yeah, or imagine, right, yeah, kind of those sound buffering
Yeah.
things you see in a theater.
I suppose we
Yeah.
say unless sound buffering is installed, they will provide a third-party report.
I mean, do we just want to say the third party report because then they might install the sound buffering, but say it's not sufficient or the inverters are too close to the boundary lines and,
Right.
it's overcoming
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like the sound buffering is something that they would install after a third party or the
Afterwards,
CEO
right.
says you're not actually in compliance
Right.
with this, fix it,
yeah.
Didn't they have a sound problem at the substation down by you? It sounded early on.
I don't know. I mean, I've been there 7 years, so that might be before my time. 8 years, whatever it's been. It's a blur.
The other thing too is when one of these inverters decides, it's gonna grow in its output of noise. We'll never know until an abutter says, son of a gun, I don't like that high pitched humming
Right.
at 10 o'clock at night.
Kind of just the way it is though, isn't it? Like,
Well, that's why I said, should it be checked again at a certain point?
Well, typically not. I mean, once they get their permit, I think they're good until there's a complaint. Somebody says, code enforcement goes out and does a check. So I think that's probably all we can do is,
and when we say residential abutter, I mean, that's just,
well, that's just, yeah.
that's, so say, take the South Monmouth one, for example. I mean, can they put the inverter right up against my boundary line and say, well, in this parcel, there's no house, so
Well,
it doesn't matter?
And that's just the way this ordinance, the ordinance, when the comprehensive ordinance was set up, the concern was residential abutters.
Yeah,
And so we would have to be specific in the solar ordinance that those decibel levels just apply generally. Doesn't matter what your neighbor is.
I would be in favor of saying that. And that's should just be all abutters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? So then you had setback.
Yep.
So one of the clear deficiencies of our ordinance showed up on this latest project in that it abuts two different roads. And the ordinance, in terms of the 50-foot setback, is just from the road that is considered the front or access. So again, if we do 50 feet from any road, we have to cite that, or if we make it a 50-foot buffer from all lines, we just state that.
I don't know if you want to do all lines, but either Fish Hatchery or South Monmouth, any road, any artery should have that 50-foot buffer. Simple as that, not because of just noise, but the visual aspect of of it as well.
But doesn't that also apply to an abutter then? So should an abutter have that 50-foot clearance?
I mean, as an abutter who's having one go in, I mean, I certainly would want more than 20, but it is what it is now, so.
So I can't remember, what did Wayne do? They're buffering.
I mean, 50 feet is not. That 50 feet is not, I mean, it's not that far.
You still up to 50 feet?
Well, no, but I mean, I can picture it pretty well because I know how big my barn is. It's not even halfway down the barn aisle, so it's not that far.
Okay. I
I
know.
don't know, is that a
Wayne-
challenge? Now I feel challenged. You want to go try right now in the parking lot? Takes it off.
Wayne had pretty good setbacks, I thought.
Yeah, that's a big setback.
Yeah,
I mean, that's far.
I don't know.
Which page was that on? Setback, oh yeah, number 4 on page 5. Yeah, and it's not even based off of what zoning, because they have zoning, it's not even based off the zoning districts, it's universal.
100 feet from all lot
100 feet,
lines.
period.
Taking up more land.
I mean, that's the flip, you know, this, I mean, yeah, so Reed Field, for example, has restrictions on, you know, lot sizes, basically, that can actually host these things and kind of restricts the number of lots in town that you could even put one on. But then, you know, the flip side of that is you're possibly taking your biggest undeveloped lots in town and making them the targets of the development. So, and the other thing with Wayne too, on that same there, number 1 there, that it should not exceed 30% coverage of a lot area.
We have 80%.
Right. I mean, that's, you know,
A lot, I mean,
that is also extremely restrictive.
that's, to me, that's overly restricted. Because typically, these developers are only leasing the land that they're putting the arrays on in any setback area, sort of. So,
I mean, I think by doing that, they're really, I mean, it's kind of the same thing as what Reed Field did, I think, where they're restricting it to very large lots in town and trying to avoid the situation where, say, like the fish hatchery in South Monmouth Roads, where it's going pretty close to many abutters down there. You know, I'm not talking just my hayfield. I mean,
yeah,
it's gonna be front and center for a lot of people's homes once that thing goes in, should it go in. And that, you know, because yeah, I mean, this project, I don't think would comply with that. That's a 20-acre parcel on South Monmouth Road, Fish Hatchery Road, and they want to do 8 acres of development. So.
yeah, and so that means of the 8 acres, they have 2.5 that they can use.
Right.
Doesn't seem to me.
Right, so it's the intent. I mean,
Yeah.
it is the intent to make it so that you can't put these things on 20-acre lots. I mean, because that's, I mean, effectively what it does. I mean, no solar developer would then come after
Yeah.
any parcels that are smaller than 50 acres.
Right, and see, then by doing that, if there's other land there, is it taking up other land that could be used for recreation, agriculture, because you're forcing them to have such a large project? Is that going to be unintended consequences?
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, that, yeah, I mean, that's also, I guess, assuming that, you know, everyone who has a 50-acre lot or whatever size parcel, or, wants to work with a solar developer, that's. It definitely restricts the number of individuals in town who could even host a development.
Right.
I mean, even our farm is broken up into 5 different parcels, and none of them, I can't remember how big they all are, but I mean, they're not. Yeah.
Well, let's think about lot coverage, just come back to setback, because that's where we were.
Yeah,
I think there's some benefit by having a uniform setback. Whatever lot, whether it's the road or a butter, person, company.
Yeah, unfortunately, working with the lot lines, some cases, there would actually be no need for it, if there's nothing there. Yeah. Field and forest. And how you have to do it.
Well, also nothing's permanent, so. I mean. Maybe field and forest today, but 10 years from now, those butters lots, they may want to put a house on those, and then. Well,
Okay,
suddenly the abutter is,
tell you what my feeling is there. I buy the lot next to you. I build my house there. I don't want to hear the cows, what the activity or smell them. That's my problem.
yeah, no, I mean, that's also fair. Yeah.
So. 'Cause I'm not worried about what's 10 years down the road, somebody gets themselves too close to solar array, then they want to start reshaping things.
Are you saying you have a problem with cow manure now? I mean,
Not at all.
do we really need to go outside and,
Not at all. We went through this a few years back, and
yeah,
I just couldn't believe it.
with what?
Somebody that wanted to restructure the farm because they didn't want to hear the noise anymore
Oh,
or smell.
well, that's too bad for them anyway, because we have the right to farm law in the state
Yeah.
of Maine, so
Yeah,
you can just say tough luck, it's in the Constitution.
Yeah, I don't know
It doesn't
back
really,
then
or
if it was.
it's
or
in the
not,
state
but-
statute or whatever, I mean.
Jerry Smith's. Well, boy, we lived down on the beach road and he would spread. It would stink up the whole downtown.
yeah, for a while there were people spreading chicken, wasn't it chicken manure, and that was.
That's the best stuff around.
Fiber.
yeah, maybe good, but
I
it's
still
going to
spread chicken. If I could still get it, I'd still be spreading it. Everybody could just suck it up. So only stinks for a couple weeks of the year. Makes the green grass grow, I always want to put on the back of my spreader, welcome to the country.
Yeah,
But yes, point heard on that. Yeah.
When Piper would spread it. We were at the school. Windows be open because it'd be.
well, we're still on setback. I mean, we- still-
We're reminiscing. Come on.
I think I saw 50 feet.
Yeah. Should we go with 50 feet from all? I mean, I'm comfortable with. Wayne is 100, but seems,
100 seems a little extreme to me. But I mean, 50 feet to me doesn't seem that crazy. I mean, especially, I don't know, we're gonna get the buffering next, but I mean, if we wanted to adopt. We talked about, should there be required widths and things like that? I mean, if we were to say Bodenham as a 25-foot width requirement on their buffer, I mean. 50 feet doesn't seem all that crazy anymore.
yeah. If you're gonna have an additional buffer there.
Yep.
Of some type. Well, why don't we say 50 for now and we'll just continue. So then on lot coverage, as I say, we're currently at 80%. That's not in the section on the solar ordinance. It's in an earlier section in our ordinance. I talked about lot coverage because I remember we had to kind of go. So there's a, maybe I can find that. There's a sort of a standard for lot coverage generally. And as I say, we increased it for solar, allowed a bigger, but whether we want to, wish I could find, oh, here it is, lot coverage.
And this lot coverage is like coverage of the area inside the development. It is not specifically the square footage that is covered by the panels themselves. Am I understanding that
Right,
correctly?
it would be the
Okay.
whole, so the roadway.
Okay.
It would be, I don't know that the buffer would count as lot coverage. Generally, you're talking about building and parking lot and infrastructure. And I've lost that.
That would be bizarre to say the buffer counted, that's big. That's just trees.
Yeah. If I can find that lot coverage section.
Hey, are you gonna want us to pull the Celtics game up for you since we're not using the Zoom?
What's that?
Do you want us to pull the Celtics game up for you since we're not using the Zoom? That's 7:30, right?
All right.
Wish I could.
On residential and mixed-use lots served by a subsurface waste disposal, no more than 30% of the lot area may be covered by buildings and other impervious surface. All other lots shall not exceed 50% of the lot area covered by buildings and other impervious surface, with the exception of lots containing a commercial solar array where lot coverage shall not exceed 85%. Four point one. 0.42.
Steve, can you say again, what was the 30% type and then the 50% type?
So if you have a residential lot that you have a septic system, no more than 30% of the lot can be covered by buildings and other impervious surfaces.
That's a lot of any size.
A lot on any size.
I guess it's the small lot.
On residential and mixed uses, so I suppose it could be where you have a home occupation or some commercial use and residential, and then, so then say you're dealing with, just to give you an example, Dollar General. So whether that's, hopefully that fit in there, but so Dollar General, well, they may be on the sewer, so if you this. So Dollar General can't exceed 50%.
So is that just commercial or just anywhere, any commercial?
Any commercial can't exceed 50%. And, but because of the scale of solar, I guess when we passed this, we said, well, we don't want 100% covered, but we'd go up to 85, but maybe that's too big a figure. I don't know. Again, we just pull that out of,
There.
yeah, I'm not sure it came out of an ordinance. It might have come out of another ordinance, but
in there, but
we didn't have any experience
Yeah.
other than looking at a limited number of ordinances that had
Right.
been put into place at the time.
Yeah, personally, I haven't really looked at too many ordinances specifically for their lot coverages. I mean, I could ask Thatcher just if they, if he's seen what a lot of other towns are doing. I mean, 30% there with Wayne, I mean, that just seems like they're keeping it
They keep
like
it
all
pretty
residential,
small. Yeah,
which I mean, that to me, it seems very restrictive. But 85 also seems, seems very high, but I
Right.
don't know. I mean,
so, we should probably maybe consider being somewhere between 50 and 85 for solar.
like 75.
75, does that work for people? Reducing it to 75? Kind of just again, pulling a number out of thin air, but I mean,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, but it seems more reasonable.
Yeah, and I mean, we're gonna probably come back to this and kick it around, come up with some ideas tonight, think about it.
Yeah. Well, I can circle back to Thatcher and see if he's come across just what other towns are doing there. That seems helpful.
Okay. Um,
Yeah, I have a question. And in reading the different ordinances, I noticed that the other, I guess this relates directly or tangentially, that other ordinances talk about the percentage of a parcel, whereas Monmouth measures it in square feet. Like, a small, just as an example, small solar energy system, airspace projected over a roof or the ground is less than 1,500 square feet. But a large solar energy system is equal to or greater than 17,000 square feet. And again, if you look at like Auburn and Thompson, they talk about percentages of the parcel. And I wondered why
They do.
that measurement was different, or that standard of measurement was different.
I thought that, I feel like we're talking about two separate issues here, because my understanding is that what we were doing, and I've seen in other ordinances, is we were laying out different guidelines for what classifies a small, a medium, and then a large array, and then how they should be governed by the ordinance. So, whereas we were talking just now about, the amount of percentage of a parcel that can be occupied by an array. Which I think in all these ordinances is really for large and medium arrays or even just large arrays that are falling, having much stricter guidance to them. I mean, if you look at the Wayne ordinance, they have different ways that they are regulating just right from the start based on size. And I mean, I actually wanted to bring up this issue tonight because to me, honestly, like, I feel like some of these, I don't know, I mean, what was that again, Bon? I mean, 17,000 square feet? Is that a large ordinance, a large array in Monmouth?
Yeah,
I mean, that's actually not that large.
well,
17 is, I think, what we were trying to do is, yeah, if someone wanted to put an array on their buildings or in their yard
Right.
for their own use, we weren't trying to make it restrictive in terms of
Okay.
what
well,
they had to do.
Okay. Oh,
Okay, so that it's not even, okay. I just got very confused because it seems like there was, again, one ordinance is talking, or several ordinances are talking about a percentage of a parcel, and we're talking about square feet, and so
If-
that was my question. I just didn't understand.
yeah, Bonnie, if you pull up the Wayne ordinance in section 4 on page 2 of the Wayne ordinance, they do the same thing that we did, and they define all the different types of, scales and types of solar energy systems. So they classify a large scale solar energy system. They actually, and this is what I'm saying, so they classify a large scale one as anything greater, equal to or greater than 4 acres. So 174,000 square feet.
Wow.
Their medium scale is anything equal or greater than 3,000 square feet, but less than 4 acres. And then small scale is tiny. Or
Yeah.
anyway, 3,000 square feet.
Okay.
Yeah, only 20 kilowatts. It's very small.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I actually feel like Monmouth definition of a large scale array might be kind of small. But this definition of a large scale array is that seems, with as restrictive as some of their things are, then calling, a large scale array anything greater than 4 acres. I mean, that's a big. It's like,
That's, wow. 4 acres. That's a whole different thing. Now I'm even more confused. Hello?
Yeah, we're here.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're doing it all totally on square footage and not capacity. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
that's the other thing too with the Wayne, like their capacities don't entirely make sense to me because they say a large scale is anything equal or greater than 4 acres and or that generates a nameplate capacity of 1 megawatt or greater. Well, you're not going to find I don't know. Yeah. It seems like most of the projects to generate a megawatt, you need quite a bit more than 4 acres.
yeah. Yeah.
Or 40 acres, is that correct? It's
Yep.
4.95 or 99 megawatts, or they all come in just under to meet the community solar standards that they classify as tax breaks and everything else.
And just looking at ours. Yeah, so we have small. Total airspace projected over a roof or ground is less than 1,500 square feet.
Yep.
Then if it's between 1,500 and 16,999, it's medium. And then large is anything more than 17,000.
Again, that's where I got confused about the size as opposed to a percentage of a parcel. So,
We took this, that came out of some something we got from, it might have been Maine Farmland or
Okay, yeah.
I think that at the time. I think that's what we just adopted.
Okay.
I mean, it's also fine.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just bringing greater scrutiny to all projects that come before the planning board, but at the same time, I don't think you're going to see too many projects that are greater than 17,000 square feet just for commercial or personal consumption. That's quite a lot of power.
Yeah.
So it's probably kind of a. Yeah, I mean, you're not really going to see any projects probably smaller than the one proposed on the South Monmouth Road, Fish Hatchery Road. I can see any projects smaller than right around 1 megawatt.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. They're coming in right under 1 megawatt so that they can jump ahead in CMPCQ. They can jump ahead of all the other projects. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, there are all these little funny loopholes that, everybody's figured out.
Well, I would like to propose that we adopt some, if not all, of the language in the Bowdenham ordinance having to do with visual impact. Because they're very specific, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Say you must do these things. For example, they say the plan shall incorporate vegetation as a visual screen that must provide year-round screening. Which we don't have. Screening comprised largely or entirely of evergreen and or shrub, minimum of 4 feet, with at least 2 rows of planting. If the vegetated screen is at least 25 feet wide, and I'm not sure, certainly that would be the ridge. I'm not sure, like on the South Monmouth Road, well, I don't know. It may be a mix of evergreen and deciduous. Larger trees may be required for screening with larger projects. But I thought that the idea of year-round screening and largely or entirely of evergreen and shrub with minimum height, I think that I would like to propose that we incorporate that kind of language.
Yeah.
So, but it's very, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, we've got to look at our general buffer requirements that we have overall applied. And see if that needs to be changed in any way. The general standard, and then whether you add additional specific requirements for certain types of development. So the ordinance talks about, I think, either plant, I kept trying to find it as we're talking, either
It says,
plant,
it's very short, and it just says reasonable effort, and I think that opens a great big hole to walk through. Shall be made to minimize visual impact by preserving native vegetation, screening abutting properties, or other appropriate measures. That's it.
what page is that on, you know?
That's on the 3rd page of the ordinance.
Not the are you talking about, you're not talking about the Monmouth ordinance?
Yeah. I have a copy of the Monmouth ordinance that Lori made for me,
Okay,
6.8.9,
okay,
solar vegetation,
okay.
and
Well, there's another section before that, okay, but let's look at 6.89. Just scrolling down again. But we have general standards for commercial development that is next to residential. So most projects, there's no screening. Well, I don't want to say no screening. It's screening only to residential properties. We just have to make sure that whatever we do is kind of looks at the overall requirements, just to make sure we don't miss something.
Steve, are you saying that you want the requirements for solar screening to be the same as all commercial screening?
No, not necessarily, but it might be a good opportunity to look at what, even though it might be a little bit beyond our scope, are the buffering requirements that we have generally well thought out and written? Do we need to make, even in the general section, some amendments to talk about the type of plantings and you know, we may have specific requirements that we just apply to solar, but again, are our general buffering requirements appropriate? You know, should we say things about use of native species and so forth, just because now we kind of recognize that that's an important consideration. All right, let's first.
Well, that's not bad. Might as well look at all of them and so that at least they're reasonably consistent. But I think there's a difference in the siting of a solar array as opposed to a Dollar General. Those are different, have different visual impacts. And I'm thinking about buffering and the visual impact of a solar array that, I mean, they're not going to build a Dollar General on the ridge because that would be ridiculous. So it's going to be placed in a different place. So you want consistency in all of the ordinances, but I think it does need to be recognized that there is a difference between citing a Dollar General and citing 40 acres of a solar array. I mean, otherwise, agricultural land that was producing and has now disturbed a view. But that's another thing. And I have a question about soil distribution, disturbing soil. But maybe I should wait.
Yeah, you know, if we're on visual impact, we should kind of,
Okay. I'll wait.
I mean, I kind of agree with what Bonnie is saying. I mean, also just thinking about.
well, I think that's why we left it general in the visual, in the solar. And you kind of refer back then to the general standards. So in here, we do say, so for instance, in this section on solar, it says screening from all properties. And that again. Let's see here. Whereas, minimize visual impacts preserving native vegetation, screening abutting properties. Well, the general standard says only screening for residential abutters. So that if you had two commercial developments side by side, I don't think you have a necessary requirement of buffering.
No,
And so that's why we put something in here to make sure there was screening from all properties. And we do
I
have,
think that the solar ordinance that I have in front of me, when it talks about visual impact, it's very loose, very generic, and it doesn't really ask for much at all. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say, particularly when you're talking about coming into a place that previous to the solar array was open land or agricultural land, whatever, open space, but a much softer visual impact. And now the visual impact of a solar array is very different. Again, from what was previous. If they hayed the field on South Monmouth Road and what we're talking about, if they were haying that, then again, when you're on either South Monmouth Road or Fish Hatchery, the visual impact is soft, if that makes sense to you, as opposed to seeing all of that metal. So I think it's appropriate to recognize that difference and make language that makes it very clear that you're going to soften as much as you can this visual impact of something that's never been there before. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think it makes sense to me, yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed to adopting the language in the Bodenham ordinance.
well, I think you got to go back. That's what I'm trying to find.
I mean.
We have general standards for buffering. And so I think you got to look at those first.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I'm trying to do a word search. I can't find it. Portion.
I don't know. I don't have a problem with language in the ordinance as it is. Plain simple as that. Because the last part of that is other appropriate measures. Planning board will dictate conditions of approval. So we can do what we want.
But Ray, do we have to establish some kind of precedent or something so that say somebody comes in that who wants to do another array similar to the one that we're talking about now. And we're going to ask the people there to put up evergreens and do this and do all four sides. And somebody else comes along and we say, oh, no, you have to have shrubs, we want rhododendron, we want this. And they say, wait a minute. You only ask people on the ridge to throw in a couple of shrubs. And if they died, oh, well. There's no language that makes the ridge people have to come in and replant. There's nothing. That
No,
makes them
no,
do that.
there is. It's a violation if they don't meet the standard code enforcement can require them to replace the buffer.
Where,
Because once you do a project, it still has to meet the requirements of the ordinance. So the decision that the planning board writes says you have to if you have to have a buffer, you have to have a buffer. If you have a setback, you have to maintain that setback. But yes, it means somehow that has to be brought to the attention of code enforcement.
Yeah, and to your point, Ray, I guess I mean, I would just prefer to lay things out a little more clearly because leaving it vague, it's going to be interpreted how the makeup of the planning board at that moment in time wants to interpret it. And that's just, leaves a lot. You guys today are going to interpret it possibly differently than somebody 10 years from now, depending on who's on the planning board then. Maybe you guys will still be on the planning board in 10 years, but
Yeah.
I just,
By the same token too, you can have two similar projects and conditions will be put on one project for whatever reason and not on the other one. So you're not gonna do a cookie cutter type thing. It's just not gonna work out. But I don't have a problem. This is giving the planning board wiggle room.
Yeah.
With conditions of approval. Project. That's what this is doing.
the existing ordinance is doing
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Well, that's why I say you have to look at what we have generally. So you start there. What do we require generally for buffers? Is that generally sufficient? And then you look at whether we need to add any other requirements for a particular type of development, like a solar project. So I'm trying to find, unfortunately, of course, when you're trying to find something,
You never can, I understand.
Do we want to skip this one and come back to it too?
yeah, let's
Okay.
take a further dive into buffering.
buffering to some degree.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're gonna come back to buffering.
yeah. And I'll try to find that section and get it to everybody and.
Great.
Does anyone recall reading somewhere? I recall, but I don't know where. In a solar ordinance, making a statement about the electricity that is produced by an array and how that electricity is used. I think it may be from the booklet that Farmland Trust gave us, but I looked through it again and I can't seem to find it. Saying something about the electricity produced, if it is on agricultural land, should be first used for that farm, and then secondly to the town that farm is in. Does anyone else remember that?
No, I don't.
I've run across it somewhere.
I believe the Auburn ordinance has that in it. I believe that it's not requiring that. I think it's just, that's one of their. I almost feel like that was one of their ways of saying dual use or something, just they were trying to encourage. I don't know. Yeah, there's definitely language out there around
Yeah.
or around permitting the development of prime farmland for solar if it's for on-farm consumption, just,
Okay,
But again, I mean, I just don't, you know. I don't think that we really have any farms of the scale that, you know, they're gonna use. Honestly, the closest thing to a farm that we have that's gonna use that scale of power that they're gonna have a large scale array is probably that, the pot barns down there with the guy who owns who owns the 20-acre lot. At first, I thought that's what he was doing, that he was installing his own array for net metering, because I mean, they have like a 800 amp service down there or something crazy.
Well, he did tell us at the site visit that he plans to add arrays to his building.
Yeah, but that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Something's going on with the filters down there, because boy, it is reeked of cannabis for the last week or two, says the dairy farmer.
Oh, I looked at this. Well, coming to get this yogurt, and it was like, whoa.
Yeah, I feel bad for the abutters down there. It smells very strongly, and it actually has for a number of weeks, and I don't know, something is going on with the filters. Anyway, that's a totally different topic. So were we gonna move on to then the next line, or you seem to still be looking for
Oh, go
buffering?
ahead. I'm just looking while you
Okay.
guys are talking.
So the next thing was, we have two more things on our list, density provision. Which is require a minimum distance between arrays, and if so, what is that distance?
Or do we need to? I mean,
Yeah, do we need to? You're gonna kind of locate down in your neck of the woods. As opposed to in Northumberland. You can't have a density requirement part on this. Not the other rest of it.
Well, I mean, there'd be a density requirement across the whole town, it wouldn't just be
Yeah.
part of town. And they aren't only going to locate in South Monmouth, I mean, they,
No, they'll populate South Monmouth at that point. Starts going elsewhere.
it depends how big of a parcel, how big, you know, I mean, if the project proposed is large enough. And it becomes worth it to the developers to improve the power lines, you know, farther distances, but. I mean, I guess I would,
Mention density. Do they?
within the site,
no, yeah. No, nobody else is doing density in this way. You know, I mean, we talked about how our town has a solar. Or not solar, a cell, communication tower density provision.
Right.
I mean, I guess to me, it doesn't seem that different. It's just saying that basically, because without a density provision, I mean, what is going to happen? I mean, over time, South Monmouth is just going to become one big solar field, basically.
Yeah.
Naturally.
I mean, is that what everyone wants?
No.
well, you-
Remind me.
Certainly, Bonnie, that would look nice. Okay. No, it would be interesting. Be to get in, you know, it's too damn late to send out a survey. Mr. Ludwig,
what is it?
is it?
So who are you gonna have do it?
Yeah.
That's
How would you
that's
have
the
it
problem.
done? Online? People don't do that.
I mean, you're asking generally, Ray, whether people in town want to see,
Do they care?
yeah,
Or is it so?
And not in my backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get input from talking to different people, but that's a few people.
Yeah.
It's the whole problem with this whole thing.
I don't recall we've come across it, right, that any density, town density, I mean, you have towns that have zoning. And so
Yeah.
they would say, for instance, you can't put one of these, we look at Wayne has zoning, so they're saying you can't put one of these solar projects in the what they call the village districts, right? Some towns limit the number of, say, marijuana businesses. Like I think Hollowell tried to limit it to a certain number. But again, most of these towns may have a zoning ordinance to kind of fall back on. I mean, we have things like preserve the natural landscape, you know, people like the rural character of Monmouth, and do these projects take away from it? So maybe there's enough in the comp plan that you can say that, yeah, you can have two solar projects within a half a mile of one another. I don't know what would you do? How would you
And I think,
structure it?
I think there should be something. I mean, currently there are, there's this Fish Hatchery Road, South Monmouth Road that's under review. And then the parcel where the AD electric barn has a lease on it, though the project has not come before the planning board. But I've heard that from employees of AD Electric who are working on cleaning up the site for that project. To me, I don't know, it just seems like, yeah, it is impacting the rural character of town if suddenly we're putting projects side by side by side.
Yeah.
So what we've got now, we have a development shall be planned, sited, and constructed in a manner that minimizes negative impacts upon scenic views and prominent landmarks identified in the Monmouth Comprehensive Plan. Measures to minimize visual impacts may include enhanced setbacks, height limitations, or limitations on construction materials. But it doesn't say anything about the number. Now, so then, if you do something about the number of projects, do you have to then limit it to areas that have been identified as scenic resources? And so then we got to go back, we should go back. So there was an earlier comp plan that had a section on that.
Yes, there was.
And there were
I
certain,
remember
a lot of it
something.
was like, the ridge, different ridges and lake areas. I don't know, South Monmouth Road at one time, it might have been at that time,
It did.
might have been viewed as scenic because there weren't nearly as many houses on that road as there are now.
There were several scenic views. I think it was the 07 plan, because I remember from our meetings, I remember
Yeah.
Dave, I think, or you brought in the maps
Yeah.
for one of the meetings. I don't know, that whole process was so long and but
I know where you're going, but
Well, and in several of the other ordinances, they use the language preference should be given to locating the system on previously developed, degraded, or marginally productive portions of property. So when you're talking about agricultural productive agriculture, that's not degraded. mean, but is that language, does that language lend itself to any kind of, density language?
Don't think so.
No, not inherently.
No, okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, do we need to come back to density?
Well, it's a tough one. I mean,
And
I think, given what we have in Monmouth, you would have to tie it to something.
So what's the cell phone tower one tied to? Because it's the same thing. It's an
Well,
aesthetic
because
thing.
it's on ridges.
And ridges are inherently scenic. and
Yeah.
And that's outlined in the plan, that ridges are inherently scenic.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it might mention it in here too. 3.2. And it's one of these standards.
well, so it sounds like one, if a town has zoning, then that allows for a connection to a density provision.
It may, there are different types of zoning.
Yeah,
And,
but
some have sort of what I want to say, how I want to frame that. You're identifying areas where things can and cannot occur, number one. And so then where you say, yes, you can have solar projects here. Maybe you can have other standards there that say, yeah, we're going to limit the number of these. The only limitations on numbers that I have seen is in these marijuana ordinances.
And what's the justification for that then?
yeah,
Was that, I mean, that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Based off of anything except for popular opinion, right?
Right, or public health safety, I don't know. It's just like, if you go to get a liquor license, you're not supposed to be within so many feet of a store, a church, a school, a playground. I mean, there are these
Right.
laws that are passed that nobody has challenged,
I mean, isn't the central point of the comprehensive plan, or not, a Monmouth plan anyway, it goes on and on and on about preserving the rural character of the town and how important that is, and survey after survey that we've done, people talk about open space being the most
Yeah.
important thing to them, the rural character being the most
Yep.
important thing to them. I mean, you want to talk about ruining rural character in a heartbeat, start putting solar array after solar array after solar array. In a given portion of town, instead of having them at least spread out over some distance. I don't know. I mean, to me, being a dumb farmer anyway, that seems to be like grounds for a density.
But what's the parameter? What would we set? Is it gonna be no new solar development shall be sited within so many feet?
no, not feet,
Well, 5,280 feet's a mile.
yeah, I know, but.
mean, that's why,
How long is the South Monmouth Road?
that's why I sent out those maps. I don't know if anybody actually looked at them, but that was, what I was doing instead of what I should have been doing that day, is making maps with radiuses on them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think a mile basically encompassed the entire Ridge Road and the entire South Monmouth Road, for those two proposed projects. a mile and a half got you up onto the Cobussy Road, the whole way down, to the end of Monmouth for the South Monmouth one, and I can't remember quite how far that got you, on the Ridge Road. I mean,
Well, the South Monmouth Road, isn't it like, is it 2.5 or 3 miles long?
it's probably 2.5 miles long. So if you say nothing within a mile radius, then it's pretty much the whole road.
So if you said a half a mile, just for discussion purposes, it can't be located within a half a mile of any boundary of a project.
Right, which was the other limitation of what I did, which is I didn't have the mapping capability of doing the boundaries of
Yeah.
it.
So that would that preclude that type of development where AD Electric was, for example?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to pass this around. I mean, this is what a half mile looks like if anyone wants to see it, or half mile from the Fish Hatchery Road project. A half mile is basically up to getting closer to my house, but not even that far, down the Fish Hatchery Road to I don't know the neighbors there, but kind of the last houses there on the left before you just get to trees. And then down the South Monmouth Road to probably the old Schedule Farm. That's a half mile. Half mile at least makes it. Well, at least makes it so that, there's not one, they're not stacked right on top of the other,
Terribly far. I want a mile.
Well, these are what is going to help us have less fossil fuels.
I know.
So it's all a balance. I don't know. I don't know if a mile would pass a lot of people looking at it to say what. I don't know.
A mile would basically preclude the entire South Monmouth Road. On the ridge, it is the entire Ridge Road down to basically Jack Traps. That field there would still, you get to the kind of that general area.
Well, I don't think a mile is too much, but I have a feeling I'll be outvoted on that one. And because there is no language, I don't know, where do you go to get guidance on something like this?
Well, there may be planners. I mean, there may be planners that have experience or do the research, know how to do the research.
You mean
So when Monmouth proposed, so years ago, we had a comp plan, we had a planner involved. We talked about proposing a zoning ordinance. And, we hired someone to help us put one together. You need professional assistance when you undertake something like zoning or a comp plan. And, those people have the training and ability to maybe find that, but I mean, We had someone here at the last meeting, had looked at a lot of ordinances and had never seen anything, but you know, that may not have been what he was looking for particularly, but
What do you think, Doug? You haven't said anything about it.
I think a mile is too far. I think maybe, even maybe a half a mile might be too far to. Quarter of a mile,
No,
no?
nope.
I was gonna say an eighth, but
1,320 feet.
well, the figure that stuck in my mind was for the half a mile. But again, it's gonna upset people who have land who hope to do something with it in that regard.
Is it though? I mean, how many people are within a half mile of a solar development in Monmouth who are just itching to put one in, who are actually residents of the town of Monmouth? And
Who brought it up at the hearing the other night? Asked about if the town is doing anything about density.
oh, I think that was my dad.
I thought, I
Yeah.
wondered if it was.
They live down the road from me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, these things change the neighborhood, but
I mean, you look at the current projects. The current two projects are both on land that is owned by people who do not reside in the town of Monmouth. The AD one, if that is actually the case, another non-resident of Monmouth.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm just not really convinced that there are just reams of Monmouth residents
Yeah.
who are going to be up in arms about the idea. I mean, I hear mostly negative things about solar development. And I mean, I'm not saying that I am anti-solar development, but that is just, it just seems like there is growing backlash to these projects because of the way that they're cited and because of all the things that we're trying to address here and it's change. People hate change.
Yeah.
I hate change. That's why I milk cows.
Yeah.
Hate change.
And just as a side, that went up for sale, near me. Both were bought by people coming from, other states wanting to settle. And one has already been resold, they're leaving. And the others are meeting with realtors. So,
Are the Craigs on that list? Are the Craigs on that list?
yep,
Okay, I was gonna say, I knew that they were also looking to move. So,
yep.
And why are they moving?
Variety of reasons, but I can tell you that when that went in their backyard, it was a bit of a shock. So I think we need to be very careful because we have these two things happening. On the one hand, I know we have to get away from fossil fuel. I know that. But do we do it at the expense of the reason that we live here? I don't know. And can't we find a way to live with a little of it? But to be overwhelmed, as I said, there's a difference. When you look out your window, there's a difference between a soft and a hard view. And I know because I spoke with both of the people who originally bought those houses. And they came here very specifically for a rural place to live. And they're leaving. So.
and someone may buy their house though and say, oh, okay, this is the way it is. I mean, it's
I'm gonna subscribe and lower my,
I mean, it's,
That's-
yeah,
Already here.
Where's the power for this new place going?
Well, it all gets dumped on the grid. So, I mean, even though, Bath Iron Works is getting the power for the Ridge project, it's just getting dumped on the grid, but,
yeah. So this one you can subscribe to.
right.
This one?
Yeah, so you pay a fee. I think your bill goes through this company. And then supposedly they're saying you'll get about a 20% discount. Is that the figure?
10%, yeah.
And,
15 is-
yeah,
All these
So-
companies have, you can sign up and you can get a 10%
yeah,
reduction on your power bill. It's another one of the incentives that the legislature passed back in 2018.
so they try to get a certain number of subscribers.
I subscribe to. Next day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's similar to that. Well, going back to density, it may, May Municipal may have some information on that. That's a possibility.
They have a lead where you could go to get some input.
Yeah.
They don't have anybody on staff.
I mean, we did, as I say, we have in the ordinance something on towers. Which we haven't had any new tower proposed for a while. I don't know even if the one up on Norris Hill is operational anymore. At one point it wasn't.
Towers or something that eventually you get coverage and you're kind of done.
Yeah.
This place up here.
Well, it was the one in Leeds, I think, over the town line that.
Yeah. The Farmington has an issue with arrays. I wonder if we could get in touch with town office in Farmington to see what's going on there.
What's the issue?
The issue is that they have huge arrays. And they just, there's a whole area, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the route. But they just, it's like all of a sudden, they have all of these arrays.
Well, they have the largest solar array in New England on the York farm. I believe it's 300 acres. And yeah, I mean, it has a massive visual impact on the town. And it was one of
Yeah.
those projects that, as soon as the laws changed, got developed on a bunch of prime farmland along the Sandy River and then going up the side of a large hill. And it's just, there is no way to buffer this project. It's huge and
No,
So it's right off.
it's
is it off
huge and
Route
it's
2?
polarizing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of the first thing you see.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
I don't know if they necessarily have anything about density though. I mean, I don't know if they've really, I don't know. The bare minimum of density to me just seems like we can at least say something about you can't have, the abutting parcel. I mean, just something in terms of just trying to keep it from just one after the other, after the other, after the other.
yep,
But I mean, that's still, I don't think a half mile is unreasonable. I mean, I don't think a mile is unreasonable, but I think that there should be something or looking harder at that lot coverage number to start to winnow down the number of lots in town that can host these things, which would be my
Okay.
thing.
that's another way
So-
to approach it.
But that's also taking away people's rights. So, I mean,
Yep.
it's all restricted,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is just inherent to every, it's part of, anyway.
It's a lot easier to do when you have zoning. But
Right, I mean, what's the lot coverage based off of tying back to the comprehensive plan?
well, there's a couple of different things. One was, if you have subsurface disposal systems, you were trying to make sure that somebody's system didn't affect somebody else's land. So that's one thing, that you don't have a lot of development with close to one another, close to other lots with subsurface systems.
Yeah.
And then you have phosphorus concerns that, you know, you get impervious, you know. Try to limit that impervious, say to 30%, so that the phosphorus is gonna be treated on site.
Yeah.
There's buffering, so that's,
But I mean, where did the 85% number, I mean, what was the grounds for having the 85% number versus a 50% number versus
Well, I-
100% number versus
I
the,
think we just pulled a figure out. We had to come with a figure. We were trying to get something in play. And
so that's not actually directly linked to any sort of.
it may have
provision in the
been at
comprehensive plan. There's
yeah.
no real justification for.
well, it may have been in sort of the materials we looked at years ago. There may have been something.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
What? Here again, don't even know if it would be doable, but within a half mile of an existing array, if somebody wanted to put another array half a mile or a little less, whatever, that they be required to obtain the land between them and keep it as open space? Is that something that could be played with?
I don't think so, because you can't,
seems
there's no
impossible.
way that could necessarily happen, you know.
Look at the South Monmouth Road. I mean, they would have to be purchasing houses with,
Yeah.
you know, I mean,
They wanted bad enough to buy the house.
I don't know. I mean, that's why it's simple. I mean, density, just having a density. for-
Yeah, I think if we did something, you'd say like a half a mile.
Correct. Well, do we just want to say, I have lots of disagreement somewhere between 0 and 1 mile? And do we want to come back to that at our next meeting?
Yeah,
And a half mile question mark
yeah.
being a middle
Yeah.
ground? Is that,
I think that was a quarter mile, and that's what I felt.
I know that's real close.
So leave it loose.
I think Bonnie and I both said a mile and you guys said a quarter mile, so a half a mile is somewhere. Actually, I think a half a mile is a little bit less than meeting you in the middle. We should, you know, or a little bit more than meeting you in the middle, rather. We should increase it, you know? Okay, let's move on.
Well, it's 8:30.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
So I don't know how. Start to lose.
Okay, did we zero in on lot coverage? We're gonna knock that 85% down to
I
something
think
else?
we thought maybe 75. I mean, again, I think we come back to these things, you know, so just to summarize. What did I write here? Recommendation that existing recreational uses be retained. On the noise requirement of a third party in testing once the project is operational. Setback, I have that we have 50 feet all around.
Okay. Yeah.
Lot coverage. You know, somewhere between 50 and 85, you would said 75, Ray, so we're somewhere in that ballpark, I think. Maybe we need to look at other ordinances.
Yeah.
We need to look a little more at visual impact and buffering.
Yeah.
See, I think what we need to do in terms of the buffering is to describe what the buffering would consist of. And somewhere it says native trees and fencing. But we may want to, again, kind of look at the general requirements and say what the buffering, if it's trees, could be. And then in the solar section, we might put things such as what the width of the buffering needs to be,
Okay.
just to ensure that it's adequately screening, or should any commercial development have a buffer size of a certain dimension in terms of its width? I mean, what you're gonna run into on like a business on 202 might be constrained in some ways by the size of the lot. And if they gotta get a building in and a parking area, you know, how big of a buffer are you gonna require? And is a fence suitable in some instances and not in others?
And that's why the solar, I think Bonnie and I would agree that the solar buffering is its own beast, because solar developments are just so different, being much larger
Yeah,
developments on larger parcels that enable wider buffering than say, yeah, I mean, you can't require, you know, if Irving buys Mike Sears lot down there on 126, you know, I mean, telling them that they have to put a 25-foot buffer all around the thing, I mean,
Right.
you know, that seems like that's gonna be challenging. I guess that's a big lot. I guess they could accommodate it down there, but you get what I'm trying to say, I think. It just, or Dollar General up there on 202. I mean, there would be no way that they could have put a 25-foot
Right.
buffering around that. So,
different places. There's a difference between a business on Route 202 and something on Fish Hatchery Road. It's just different. And so they need to be treated different. Yeah.
Okay, well, do we want to meet in 2 weeks? Be the 15th?
it's March. Right.
It's almost springtime.
When do we have to be done? When do we have to have,
Well,
I said the Ides of March, yeah.
it may be that this is gonna be hard to get to the town meeting. You gotta have a public hearing. You have to advertise, you have to have time to advertise. You have to have a public hearing. I mean, I'm not great on those dates. Without looking at. Well, I might have sometime in April.
It has to be, it's not 90 days, is it?
It definitely would be,
Trouble.
it'd be too bad to have this wait till November, but
Yeah.
just because I hate to see more projects come forward before because doesn't seem like many people are convinced by what Kent said about, because we've started this project, that any projects that come forward between now and the time that this proposal may be approved would be governed by it. I don't know. I've gotten mixed
Yeah,
feedback on that idea. That's Kent.
The Kent thing.
Yeah.
Canterbury.
yeah, I was just trying to look on the demands of the ordinances. I mean, that's the thing, these things take time and, you know, how often can you meet? I mean, I've got
Oh, I know. Yeah.
planning board, Ray and I have planning board next week. Doug has 2 meetings a month just with the
Right.
regular select board. There's the other things going on still with the site. Is there still a committee working on the academy?
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's,
Building committee.
I mean, maybe we could pull something together by the next meeting or pretty close to it, but whether that's enough time, we have to maybe check with the town manager what he probably knows those figures.
When is the vote in June? What day, you know?
I don't know offhand. I have to look.
Doesn't have great. But in I mean, I don't know if I don't know that I could do another meeting before the 15th myself.
No, I wasn't, I was not raising that as a like criticism that we
Yeah.
weren't meeting frequently enough, believe me.
And I'm still,
Caitlin may come unglued if I come home and tell her that we're meeting again next.
yeah,
I had to take a pledge that I wasn't joining any more committees until this committee was done.
yeah.
So
Well, still got the comp plan out there
I know it's looming out there somewhere.
somewhere. And, I mean, I thought, well, that's another story.
Tell them that we're gonna meet Sunday evening instead. Outside.
Sunday evening. Oh, yeah, she'll really like that one.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
I'm not sure of the voting date. I think it might be the 13th of June.
Let's do
And you-
the.
okay.
No, but in April. It's have to be. Together, so our budget has to be ready.
Yeah, that's right. Doesn't it all have to be done before the town report goes out? Isn't that what it is? And that's,
Before really won't go out until, town meeting.
oh, but all the things have to be in for the town report by April
Yeah,
first or,
sometime in April, I know.
okay, we were just talking about that yesterday too.
Look,
Just to add to the confusion, any of you have heard of the legislation that just got dropped in the hopper on disposal of solar panels?
See a lot of the, stuff in here, has to be done to a.
There's a piece of legislation that's gonna dictate how and when and why. It hasn't had a hearing yet.
So beyond what's in these ordinances.
Yeah, well, yeah, they wanna make it statute. Bonnie? That piece of legislation is, House Paper 515, if you care to face it down.
Okay.
It's in her ballpark, so,
Yep.
her wheelhouse. You want an LD number? Yeah, I'm trying to think of what the LD, how about 826?
826.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see what I can find.
I mean, I don't know, you may know him. Len one out of Chelsea is the one that put it in.
okay. Well, if someone wants to check with Maine Municipal, I mean, they're usually pretty helpful. Get the right
Yeah.
person.
About
Density,
density. Yeah. Yep.
density of development. I mean, as I say, you know, the only thing I've seen it consistently in is some of these marijuana ordinances.
Yeah.
That they limit the number of licenses. So that may be different. Maybe not. Essentially, you're giving somebody
Yeah.
permission to operate a solar farm.
Was it, there was? Wasn't it just the stores that they were wanting to limit?
I think you can limit anything. You could say, for instance, you didn't want you could limit the grow facilities for. Again, it was specific to recreational. You know, because there's less regulation over the medicinal. So you could limit the number of retail outlets. You could say whether you allowed certain. And you could allow grow, but not stores. You know, it was all locked in. For that. So I don't know. Okay,
And we'll draft up notes.
so did the little guy arrive?
Girl, yes, arrived, last Monday.
Oh, great. Congratulations.
Sybil,
They're both.
yep. Yep, I hope you have good associations with that, with